Imagine this: a little girl, barefoot, shaking, tears streaming down her face, runs toward a group of bikers, not police, not family, strangers with leather jackets, heavy boots, and roaring engines. She cries out only 5 words: "They're beating my mama." What happened next proves that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. From a very young age, we are taught, directly or indirectly, to judge the world by what we see. Clothes, posture, language, and outward behavior quickly become shortcuts for deciding who is good and who is bad, who is safe and who is dangerous. While these judgments may feel natural, they are often deeply flawed. The story of the little girl running to the bikers exposes just how dangerous and misleading judging by appearances can be. In many societies, bikers are portrayed in a negative light. Movies, television shows, and news headlines frequently associate them with violence, lawlessness, or rebellion. Leather jackets, tattoos, heavy boots, and loud motorcycles become symbols of fear rather than individuality. As a result, people cross the street when they see a group of bikers. Parents pull their children closer. Some even assume trouble before anything has actually happened. This stereotype becomes so strong that it overshadows the humanity of the people behind the image. But stereotypes are not truths. They are assumptions repeated so often that they begin to feel real. The danger lies in forgetting that every group, no matter how it looks, is made up of individuals with values, emotions, and moral choices. When we judge based on appearance alone, we stop seeing people as human beings and start seeing them as labels. This mindset limits our ability to recognize goodness when it appears in an unexpected form. In the story, the little girl did not have the luxury of judging by appearance. Fear strips away prejudice. Desperation silences stereotypes. In that moment, she did not see bikers, as society defines them. She saw grown-ups who looked strong enough to help. Her instincts guided her toward protection, not appearances. Ironically, the child, often considered naive, saw more clearly than many adults do. She trusted humanity over reputation. Judging by appearances can also prevent help from reaching those who need it most. If the bikers had been ignored, avoided, or treated with suspicion by the community around them, would they have felt the same sense of responsibility to act? When people are constantly judged unfairly, they are often pushed to the margins of society. This separation weakens communities and builds invisible walls between us and them. The moment we divide the world into neat categories of good, looking equals good behavior, we lose the chance to build trust across differences. History repeatedly shows how harmful surface-level judgment can be. Entire groups have been excluded, feared, or punished simply because they looked different, dressed differently, or lived differently. These judgments have led to discrimination, injustice, and even violence. While the story of the bikers is a positive example, it exists within a larger reality where many acts of kindness go unnoticed because they come from people society has already decided to mistrust. Another danger of judging by appearances is that it gives us a false sense of security. We assume that people who look respectable are harmless and that those who look rough are dangerous. But reality does not work that way. Harm does not wear a uniform, and kindness does not have a specific dress code. Some of the most hurtful actions in society come from people who appear polite, educated, or powerful. At the same time, some of the bravest acts of compassion come from those who are misunderstood or overlooked. The biker's response challenges a deeply rooted belief that strength and kindness cannot exist together. Their physical presence, often interpreted as threatening, became a shield instead of a weapon. This forces us to reconsider how often we mistake confidence for aggression or toughness for cruelty. Strength, when guided by empathy, becomes protection. When guided by judgment, it becomes fear. Judging by appearances also shapes how we see ourselves. When society labels certain looks or lifestyles as bad, Individuals within those groups are constantly pressured to prove their worth. They are expected to be exceptions rather than equals. The bikers in this story did not act heroically to change opinions, yet their actions did exactly that. They revealed that morality is not tied to image, and decency is not limited to socially approved identities. This key point ultimately exposes an uncomfortable truth. Judging others by appearance is easy, but understanding them requires effort. It requires listening, observing actions rather than looks, and allowing people the chance to define themselves through behavior. The moment we pause our judgments, we create space for unexpected goodness to appear, just as it did when a frightened child ran toward the very people society had taught others to avoid. A child's cry is one of the most powerful sounds in the world. It cuts through noise, distractions, and differences, reaching something deeply human within us. It does not ask for permission, nor does it explain context. It simply demands attention. In the story of the little girl running toward the bikers, her cry was not just a plea for help. It was a universal call to humanity that transcended age, background, appearance, and social boundaries. Children communicate truth in its rawest form. They do not filter fear through pride, nor do they disguise pain behind social expectations. When a child cries, it is real, immediate, and urgent. That urgency has a unique power because it reminds adults of responsibility. It awakens instincts older than culture, language, or law, the instinct to protect. In that moment, the little girl's words carried more weight than authority, more urgency than rules, and more meaning than hesitation. Her cry did not include details. She did not explain who they were, how long it had been happening, or whether it was safe to intervene. She simply said, "They're beating my mama." Those words carried fear, helplessness, and trust all at once. Fear, because she was witnessing violence. Helplessness, because she could not stop it herself. Trust, because she believed someone, anyone, would care enough to act. That trust is both powerful and fragile. What makes a child's cry universal is that it speaks directly to conscience. It bypasses prejudice. It ignores stereotypes. It does not recognize social divisions like class, profession, or reputation. The child did not consider whether the bikers were respected members of society or misunderstood outsiders. Her cry was not calculated, it was instinctive. She ran toward the nearest adults who looked capable of helping, guided by hope rather than judgment. This moment highlights a critical truth. Empathy is not taught first through logic, but through emotion. Before people analyze a situation, before they weigh risks or consequences, the human heart often reacts first. A child's distress has the ability to break through emotional barriers that adults build over time. It reminds people of vulnerability, of their own childhood fears, of moments when they themselves depended on others for safety. The universality of a child's cry also lies in its moral clarity. Adults often hesitate because they overthink. They worry about legal responsibility, personal risk, or social consequences. Children do not have that luxury, and their cries force adults to confront the simplicity of right and wrong. Someone is being hurt. Someone needs help. The choice becomes clear, even if the action is difficult. In many cultures around the world, protecting children is seen as a shared responsibility. A child's suffering is not considered a private matter, but a communal concern. This shared understanding exists because children symbolize innocence, future, and vulnerability. When a child cries out, it feels as though the future itself is asking for protection. Ignoring such a cry does not just feel like neglect, it feels like a failure of humanity. The little girl's cry also exposes the power imbalance present in situations of violence. Children are often the silent witnesses to suffering they cannot stop. Their cries carry the weight of witnessing injustice without having the means to correct it. By running for help, the child transformed fear into action. Her voice became the bridge between danger and intervention. In doing so, she reminded adults of their role, not as observers, but as protectors. Another important aspect of this key point is how a child's cry dissolves social masks. In everyday life, people hide behind roles: worker, stranger, bystander, outsider. But when a child cries for help, those roles become irrelevant. What remains is the question of character. Will someone respond as a human being or retreat into indifference? The biker's response showed that the call of humanity was stronger than any label placed upon them. This cry also represents trust in strangers, a trust that is becoming increasingly rare in modern society. Fear has taught many people to mind their own business, to avoid involvement, and to assume the worst of others. Yet the child trusted unfamiliar adults with her most precious thing, her mother's safety. That trust placed a moral responsibility on those who heard her. It transformed them from strangers into guardians in a matter of seconds. Ultimately, a child's cry is not just about the child. It reflects the state of the society that hears it. A society that responds proves it still values compassion. A society that ignores it reveals emotional distance and moral fatigue. In this story, the cry did what laws, uniforms, and expectations sometimes fail to do. It awakened humanity in those who heard it. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear or the presence of physical strength. Popular culture presents courage as something loud, dramatic, and heroic, something performed on a stage or captured in a moment of glory. In reality, true courage is far quieter and far more demanding. It is the decision to act when fear is present, uncertainty is high, and consequences are unknown. The response of the bikers in this story illustrates this deeper, more authentic form of courage. When the little girl cried for help, the situation instantly became complex. Violence was involved, risk was real, there were many reasons to hesitate. Intervening could have meant confrontation, injury, or legal trouble. It would have been easy and socially acceptable for the bikers to assume it was not their problem, to call someone else, or to walk away. Many people do exactly that, not because they are cruel, but because fear convinces them that inaction is safer than involvement. True courage begins at the point where excuses end. The bikers did not have full information. They did not know who they were, how dangerous the situation might be, or how it would end. Courage did not come from certainty, it came from conscience. They chose to act not because the outcome was guaranteed, but because doing nothing would have meant allowing harm to continue. This choice defines courage in its purest form. Courage is also about responsibility. When someone realizes they have the ability to help, they are faced with a moral burden. Strength, numbers, or presence become tools that can either be used or wasted. The bikers recognized that their physical presence alone could change the situation. Courage in this sense was not about aggression. It was about stepping forward and saying, "This will not continue." That step requires moral clarity and emotional strength. Another important aspect of true courage is resisting the bystander effect. In many emergencies, people assume someone else will intervene. This diffusion of responsibility often results in no one acting at all. Courage breaks this cycle. It is the willingness to be the first person to move, the first to speak, the first to refuse silence. By responding immediately, the bikers prevented hesitation from spreading and turned a moment of crisis into a moment of action. Courage also demands empathy. Without empathy, action becomes reckless or self-serving. The bikers did not act to prove something about themselves or to seek recognition. They acted because they understood the fear of a child and the vulnerability of a woman under attack. Empathy gave their courage direction. It ensured that their strength was used to protect, not to escalate violence. This balance between firmness and care is what separates courage from impulsiveness. It is also important to recognize that courage does not require perfection. The bikers did not need to be trained professionals or authority figures to act. Courage does not belong exclusively to police officers, soldiers, or emergency responders. It belongs to ordinary people who decide that someone else's suffering matters enough to interrupt their own comfort. This story reminds us that courage is accessible. It is a choice available to anyone willing to make it. True courage often comes with personal cost. It may cost time, safety, comfort, or peace of mind. Choosing to act means accepting responsibility for the outcome, even when it is stressful or complicated. Many people avoid courage not because they lack values, but because they fear the burden that comes with action. The bikers accepted that burden the moment they followed the child. They placed another person's well-being above their own convenience. Courage is also contagious. When one person acts, it gives others permission to act as well. A single step forward can turn into collective strength. The bikers acted as a group, reinforcing each other's resolve. Their unity amplified their courage, making it more effective and more visible. This shows how courage, when shared, becomes a powerful force against injustice. At its core, true courage is a moral decision. It is the choice to align actions with values, even when fear suggests otherwise. The bikers were not obligated by law to intervene, but they were compelled by conscience. That distinction matters because it reveals that the most meaningful acts of courage come from inner conviction, not external obligation. This key point challenges each listener to reconsider what courage really means. It is not about being fearless. It is about being responsible. It is not about seeking danger. It is about refusing indifference. In moments of crisis, courage asks a simple but demanding question. If I have the power to help, will I use it? Strength is one of the most misunderstood qualities in human society. It is often associated with dominance, control, or the ability to overpower others. Physical size, loud voices, authority, or force are frequently mistaken for true strength. However, real strength is not measured by how much fear one can create, but by how much safety one can provide. The actions of the bikers in this story clearly demonstrate that strength, when guided by principle, exists to protect rather than intimidate. In many situations, strength is used as a tool of oppression. Those who are physically stronger, socially powerful, or numerically dominant sometimes use that advantage to silence others. This misuse of strength creates fear and reinforces inequality. In the story, the individuals harming the woman were exercising power without morality. Their actions reflected intimidation rather than strength. Violence may appear powerful on the surface, but it is ultimately a sign of weakness, an inability to resolve conflict without harm. The bikers, on the other hand, represented a different kind of strength. Their appearance alone carried a sense of authority. Leather jackets, motorcycles, and confident posture can easily be perceived as threatening. Yet they chose not to use that image to scare innocent people. Instead, they redirected it toward protection. Their presence became a barrier between the victim and her attackers. This transformation of perceived intimidation into security is what defines ethical strength. Protective strength requires restraint. It is easy to lash out, escalate, or respond to violence with more violence. It takes far more discipline to intervene firmly without becoming cruel. The bikers did not need to prove their power. Their goal was to stop harm. Restraint shows confidence and control, both of which are essential components of real strength. Without restraint, power becomes chaos. Another important aspect of protective strength is intention. Strength without intention is dangerous. When strength is guided by ego, it seeks attention and dominance. When guided by empathy, it seeks safety and justice. The biker's intention was clear: to defend someone who could not defend herself. Their strength served a moral purpose. This distinction is crucial because it separates protectors from aggressors, even when both possess physical power. Strength used for protection also restores balance. Violence creates imbalance by exploiting vulnerability. Protective strength counters that imbalance by standing with the weak rather than above them. The bikers did not position themselves as superior, they positioned themselves as shields. This shift changes the emotional dynamic of a situation. Fear gives way to relief, and helplessness gives way to dignity. Society often teaches people, especially men, that strength must be proven through toughness or intimidation. This belief pressures individuals to suppress compassion and display dominance. The story challenges that narrative by showing that the strongest response is not intimidation, but intervention grounded in care. Strength that protects does not need to announce itself. It is felt through safety. Protective strength also builds trust. When people see power used responsibly, it reshapes their understanding of authority. The little girl trusted the bikers because she sensed their capability to protect, not their desire to intimidate. That trust was rewarded. In moments like this, strength becomes reassuring rather than frightening, and authority becomes comforting rather than oppressive. This key point also highlights that everyone possesses some form of strength. It may not always be physical. It can be emotional, social, or moral. Using that strength responsibly means recognizing when others are vulnerable and choosing to support rather than dominate. The bikers used their physical presence, but the underlying strength came from moral courage and empathy. Ultimately, strength finds its highest purpose in service. Power that exists only for itself is hollow. Power that defends others becomes meaningful. The bikers did not reduce their strength by using it to protect. They elevated it. Their actions remind us that true strength does not seek to be feared. It seeks to be trusted. Community is often imagined as something familiar and comfortable. Neighbors we know, people who look like us, or groups we already trust. We tend to believe that support comes from within clearly defined circles, such as family, friends, institutions, or authority figures. However, the story of the little girl and the bikers challenges this narrow understanding. It reveals that community is not limited by appearance, background, or social labels. Sometimes, it emerges from the most unexpected places. In moments of crisis, the idea of community becomes especially important. When danger appears suddenly, there is no time to search for official structures or familiar faces. Help must come from whoever is present and willing to act. In this story, the bikers were not relatives, neighbors, or professionals trained for emergencies. They were strangers, yet in that moment they became a community, not through shared history, but through shared responsibility. This challenges the assumption that community requires long-term connection. While lasting relationships are valuable, community can also be created instantly through collective action. When individuals unite around a moral purpose, they form a temporary but powerful bond. The bikers, by responding together, demonstrated how community can be built in seconds when people decide to stand for something larger than themselves. Unexpected community also breaks down social barriers. Society often divides people into groups based on class, profession, lifestyle, or reputation. These divisions create distance and distrust. The story cuts through those divisions by showing that compassion does not belong to a single group. The bikers, often viewed as outsiders, stepped into a role typically associated with protectors and helpers. This reversal forces a rethinking of who we expect support from and why. Another important aspect of this key point is how community fills the gaps left by systems. While laws, institutions, and authorities are important, they cannot be everywhere at once. Real safety often depends on ordinary people stepping up before official help arrives. The bikers did not replace the system, they complemented it. Their presence ensured immediate protection when it was needed most. This shows that community action is not a threat to order, but a vital part of it. Community from unexpected places also restores faith in humanity. In a world filled with stories of indifference and cruelty, moments like this stand out because they remind people that goodness exists beyond familiar boundaries. When help comes from someone we least expect, It challenges cynicism and encourages openness. It suggests that kindness is more widespread than fear would have us believe. The little girl's instinctive trust played a key role in forming this unexpected community. By running toward strangers, she unknowingly invited them into her life at its most vulnerable moment. Her trust was a bridge, one that allowed strangers to become protectors. This highlights how community is not only about those who give help, but also about those who are willing to ask for it, even when it feels risky. Unexpected community also redefines belonging. The bikers did not need to belong to the woman's family or neighborhood to care about her safety. Their sense of belonging came from shared humanity. This broader definition of community, one based on values rather than identity, creates stronger and more inclusive societies. It reminds us that we are connected not just by proximity, but by responsibility to one another. There is also a lesson here about visibility. Many groups in society are misunderstood or overlooked. Their positive contributions often go unseen because people focus only on negative stereotypes. When such groups act with compassion, they reveal layers of community that already exist but are rarely acknowledged. The bikers did not suddenly become good people in that moment. They revealed goodness that was already there. This key point encourages reflection on our own assumptions. It asks us to consider whether we are open to receiving help from unexpected sources, and whether we are willing to offer help outside our comfort zones. Community grows when people stop limiting compassion to familiar circles and start recognizing shared humanity wherever it appears. In this story, community was not planned, organized, or formal. It was spontaneous, imperfect, and deeply human. And that is precisely what made it powerful. Every crisis carries a moment of choice. It is the moment when a person hears a cry for help and must decide whether to respond or retreat. That moment is often brief, but its consequences can be lasting. The story of the little girl running to the bikers centers on this defining choice. It asks a quiet yet powerful question. When someone cries out in fear, who will answer? Answering a cry for help is not always dramatic. Most of the time, it happens in ordinary settings, on streets, in homes, in public places, where people are busy with their own lives. The challenge lies in interruption. Responding means pausing personal priorities and recognizing that someone else's pain matters in that moment. Many cries go unanswered not because people are cruel, but because they are distracted, uncertain, or afraid of involvement. Fear plays a major role in silence. People fear making the wrong decision, misunderstanding the situation, or facing consequences. They fear conflict, responsibility, and risk. These fears are human and understandable, but they often become excuses that justify inaction. Being the person who answers the cry does not mean being fearless. It means refusing to let fear be the final decision maker. Another barrier to answering the cry is the belief that someone else is better suited to respond. People assume authorities, professionals, or more qualified individuals will step in. While such roles are important, they are not always immediately present. In the space between harm and help, ordinary people become the first line of defense. Answering the cry means accepting that moral responsibility does not require a title or permission. Answering a cry also requires attentiveness. Many cries are not loud. They come in subtle forms: hesitation, visible distress, silence where there should be confidence. The little girl's cry was clear and urgent, but countless others are quieter. Being the kind of person who answers means developing awareness and empathy, noticing when something is wrong, even if it is not openly stated. There is also a cost to answering. It may cost time, comfort, or emotional energy. It may lead to difficult situations or uncomfortable conversations, but the cost of ignoring a cry is often far greater. Silence allows harm to continue. Indifference reinforces injustice. When no one answers, the message received by the vulnerable is that their suffering does not matter. Answering the cry does not always require dramatic action. Sometimes it means standing beside someone, calling for help, or refusing to look away. Small actions can interrupt harmful situations and open the door for further support. What matters is the willingness to engage rather than withdraw. The bikers answered the cry not by overthinking, but by moving toward the problem. This key point also emphasizes personal accountability. It is easy to admire stories of courage from a distance, but the real challenge lies in internalizing the lesson. Each person must decide in advance what kind of individual they want to be when faced with someone else's fear. Waiting until the moment arrives often results in hesitation. Character is revealed not in intention, but in response. Answering the cry also shapes identity. Each time a person chooses to act, they reinforce a self-image rooted in empathy and responsibility. Over time, these choices define who we are. Likewise, repeated inaction builds a habit of avoidance. The difference between the two lies in a single decision made again and again. The story ultimately serves as a mirror. It reflects not only what the bikers did, but what any person could do. The cry did not belong only to that little girl. It represents every call for help heard and unheard. Being the person who answers means choosing humanity over comfort, responsibility over indifference, and action over silence. This story is not really about bikers, or even about one frightened little girl. It is about a moment that could happen anywhere to anyone. A moment when fear reaches out for courage, when vulnerability searches for strength, and when humanity waits for an answer. The little girl ran toward strangers, carrying nothing but trust. The bikers responded with action, carrying nothing but conscience. Between those two choices, asking for help and offering it, lives the true meaning of humanity. We may never face the exact same situation, but we will all face moments where someone needs us. A voice may tremble, a cry may rise, a wrong may unfold right in front of us. In that moment, we will not be judged by how we look, what we own, or who we are known to be, but by what we choose to do. So let this story stay with us, not as a headline, but as a responsibility. Let it remind us that kindness can come from anywhere, courage can rise in anyone, and strength finds its purpose in protection. And when the cry is heard again, because it always is, may we be ready to answer.